Teal dear, it's rare to see someone who has gone so far around the political horseshoe that they have gone from anarchy to straight-up authoritarianism, but this guy's done it somehow.
That I work with, and most people who identify themselves as feminists work with, is the fight for the equality of the sexes.
As opposed to the actual definition, which says equality for women. You will notice that the word that has in its definition the equality for all people is egalitarian. Seriously, take a moment to compare these two words. They are actually very different in their meaning.
Okay, for starters, you use the dictionary definition fallacy. I used to use this a lot in my older videos, but luckily I don't use it anymore.
And yet the dictionary definition of feminism is the first port of call for a lot of feminists when people start criticizing feminism and the actions of the individuals in it. Nice to see that that point went straight over your head.
Now, to further elaborate, have a look at these definitions. Socialism, a political and economic theory that the social organization which advocates the means of production, distribution and exchange should be owned and regulated by the community as a whole. This is the view held by the majority of socialists, and it has also been what has been done and put into action by socialists throughout history and even today, see Argentina. However, most people today view that that is what socialism is. On the whole scale of things, it's the state having control over the means of production.
So dictionaries are wrong and we shouldn't pay attention to them, except for the dictionary definition of socialism, which is totally 100% accurate. You just criticize someone for using a dictionary definition and saying, well, hey, this is what the word means, is this the correct thing, yes or no, and then you use the dictionary definition of socialism and say, but this one over here is totally 100% accurate. Do you not see the contradiction? No, of course you don't.
So what this kind of tells you is that words can mean whatever the hell we want them to mean.
So words can mean whatever the hell we want them to mean, with the exception of the dictionary definition of socialism, which is totally 100% accurate, but every word in the dictionary is wrong, because something something descriptive, something something proscriptive, right? So you've contradicted your contradiction to your original point. I can see we're dealing with an intellectual powerhouse. Mind you, for someone who considers themselves to be an anarcho-feminist, who espouses the ideology of anarcho-communism, and thinks that somehow communism can function without a totalitarian state, I'm not even remotely surprised. But we'll come to that point towards the end.
They are just a sequence of letters that we combine together to create a meaning for a particular definition. Now, all that a dictionary is it gets the most popular usages of those words and combines them together to create a definition for everybody to use. This doesn't mean that it's the definition that everybody agrees with.
Yes, language is basically majority rule, with acknowledgements for colloquialisms. But the point of having a language is that we all kind of vaguely agree on what those random sounds actually mean. This is a point that you seem to have missed, probably because you're a child molester. Oh, and when I say child molester, I don't mean someone who molests children, because words can mean whatever we want them to mean. This is the problem with you social justice morons. You like to redefine words in such a way that you can use words that have terrible connotations, like calling someone a rapist, or calling them a racist, or a sexist, or a homophobe. Words which actually have quite strict legal meanings. But you convert it in such a way that you can use them to describe a massive umbrella of events, so that when someone does something really, really mild and not actually like homophobic or racist or anything like that, you get to call them a homophobe or a racist, and then when people hear you say that, they'll actually think that you're talking about the criminal recognized definition of the word, thus meaning that you can basically brand someone as something considerably more terrible than they are in order to make an emotional appeal to the public to get them on your side.
The dictionary is not an authority to go to, and if you want further information on this, I suggest you check out Anarcho-Bag's video, and caps, please stop using dictionaries.
That caption that you added in the upper left of that clip says everything we need to know about you. Using the dictionary is fine when it supports what you're saying, but when anyone else uses the dictionary to support what they're saying, it's a fallacy and should be disregarded.
To add to this, the egalitarian position, when we're using the relevant sphere we're talking about here, is usually the jumps to phrase used by people when they're questioned on whether or not they're a feminist. And usually this egalitarian movement is really nothing more than an acknowledgement position. I agree with the equality of all people, and that's where you stop. And if you want more relevant information on this, I suggest you check out a video made by DevilFoodCake69, Join the Modern Egalitarian Movement Now.
That would be a video in which this guy creates a massive elaborate straw man of what he thinks an egalitarian is. Basically, the entire thing can be summed up as saying that all egalitarians sit around saying that they believe in equal rights for everyone and they're not doing anything about it, which is simply not true. There are people who define themselves as egalitarians who do a lot of humanitarian work. There are also people who define themselves as egalitarians who do in fact campaign for social change. But the assertion that you're making that someone saying that they're an egalitarian is simply an acknowledgement position and leads them to not doing anything is just not true. I also like how you have no evidence for this claim.
So why do I, a dude, need feminism, right? I stand to benefit a lot from the current power structures of the genders, right? A lot.
Insert example here. We're waiting.
Men are guided by patriarchal norms into more powerful job fields, like police, courts, governments, etc.
Ah yes, the good old patriarchy argument. Unfortunately, nobody has actually proven that the patriarchy exists. Provide me with evidence that there is some secret organization of men who are working to benefit men while simultaneously oppressing women, and that the patterns that we see in society are simply not down to individual choices. You're not going to be able to. But it's interesting that you leap to the conclusion that there must be some sort of authoritarian force making this happen. But it doesn't really surprise me because you are projecting, since you are an authoritarian who believes that your subjective opinion on how the world should be run is the one objective true way that the world should be run.
Men are societally expected to go to work rather than look after the kids, and thereby getting a head start in our capitalist economy.
Women are not forced to become pregnant nor have children. This is a personal choice that they make. Swings and roundabouts. You cannot eat your cake and still have it. If a man chose to take a year off of his career would suffer. If a woman chooses to take a year off of her career will suffer. When you consider it like that, the reason is actually irrelevant. Also, this idea of men not looking after their children as much as women, it's somewhat a combination of basic biological necessity. A woman will actually have to take time off of work because, pregnancy and labor and recovery time and all of those biological medical factors. And then, of course, personal choice. If these women want to take more time off of work in order to raise their children, and their partner is completely okay with that, and then chooses to take extra time at work in order to alleviate the financial burden on the household to support their partner, then these are two people coming to a mutual arrangement. You have no right to tell them that they are wrong. But of course you're going to, because you're an authoritarian who believes that your subjective opinion on how the world should be run is the one objective true way that it should be run.
Men are far less likely to be raped.
This assertion is of questionable accuracy. If you actually look at some crime statistics, and you compare things such as the category of rape for women versus the category of made to penetrate for men, you tend to find that the numbers are more or less comparable. Unless, of course, you're one of those people who consider that a man being made to penetrate a woman against his will, that is, a woman having sex with a man without his consent, is not rape, in which case I will call you an idiot. Even considering the 2 million difference in the lifetime prevalence category, a category that is always of more questionable validity than the 12-month prevalence due to people's ability to misremember events, even in this study you will notice that there is more information and a wider umbrella that has gone into what is considered rape of a female than rape of a male. The sad reality is that the rape of males is something which is understudied in our society. But the more we look at it, the more we realize that men are victims of rape almost as frequently, if not just as frequently, as women. And if you go to somewhere like America and you factor in prison rape, you will actually find that male victims of rape outnumber female victims. In fact, there was a video that I recently released looking at a CDC study, which claimed that 15% of women will be the victim of rape and only 2% of men will be the victim of rape. In this study, they conflated attempted rape and failed penetration as rape in regards to women, and totally ignored the concept of made to penetrate for men, and then had absolutely no mention at all of any sort of drug-facilitated or alcohol-facilitated sexual encounter. The gist of what I'm getting at here when it comes to rape statistics and things like this is that we simply do not know. There are many different definitions at work and many variables at play. To make a definitive statement otherwise is foolish. But given all of the evidence that I have seen, I am of the opinion that men and women experience rates of sexual violence, including rape, at more or less the same rate.
Men are far less likely to be labelled sluts for being promiscuous in their sexual lives.
They just get called man-whores, philanderers, and womanizers instead. Also, someone saying something mean to you and hurting your precious fifis is not an argument.
Men are not heckled at for being loud and can be aggressive without being labelled a bitch.
No, men just get beaten up and arrested instead. In fact, it's the default position of police to remove men from their homes if they're being loud and aggressive in the direction of a woman. But hey, don't take my word for it. Let's see how society actually reacts.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I'll try and see you on Thursday, and then get the...
Why do you do that?
Why do I do what? What?
Too fucking pot. Come here.
Get your hand off me.
Come here.
What?
Where were you?
I'm not talking to you about this. I'm not talking to you. Get your hand off me.
Who was there?
Get your hand off me.
Who was there? Tell me who was there.
People are looking at us.
I swear to God, Chris, I swear to God.
People are looking at us. Will you get your hand off me? Stop. People are looking at us. What's wrong with you?
Honestly, we're fine.
I'm grand, thanks.
Okay, because someone will call the police if you carry on doing that to someone.
Okay.
'Cause if I don't, someone else will.
Okay. It's perfectly fine.
You don't have to put up with that, honey.
Okay.
Either way.
Thank you.
My office is there. You're definitely right.
Yeah, I am.
Just come and knock.
I'm grand, thanks. Do I do what? Do you ever listen to me?
Chrissy, stop it. You're crazy,
fucking
man.
manic. I've been talking at you for the last 10 minutes and you haven't listened. You haven't gotten into fucking what I've been saying to you. But you're fucking not even listening to me, that's what. Why do I push you like that? Because you won't fucking respond to me and you won't listen to me. You think you're fucking all manly.
I wasn't.
No, you can't be. No, you can't be. Don't try and fucking walk away. Stop. Listen to me when I'm talking. Don't try and fucking walk away from me. Stop it. Was it fucking bullshit? What is fucking bullshit?
What the fuck is wrong with you?
What the fuck is wrong with you? There's nothing. Don't give me that shit, okay?
Talking to him last night?
Was it?
Listen, yeah? Listen, you could tell me the truth. You could tell me the truth! Why are you talking to that guy last night?
I wasn't.
Listen, don't talk to guys. Listen! Why you was talking? I'm not playing.
What are you doing?
Oh, chill. Yo, we're filming. We're filming. Look,
You alright?
we're filming a social experiment, look. Thank you guys for saying. Look, we're filming. Thank you guys for saying.
Don't do that!
Listen.
You cheating on me again? You texting that girl again, huh?
I wasn't cheating at
I
you.
saw that picture too.
I wasn't cheating at you.
Stop on the ground.
I wasn't cheating on you.
Serious? Are you serious right now? Are you serious? Are you serious?
Come on, bro.
You don't do that shit to me.
I wasn't cheating on you.
Hell. You texted that girl again.
I wasn't cheating on you.
I f***ing caught you red-handed, dude.
So yeah, men might not be labelled a bitch for being loud and aggressive. What they get is considerably worse.
Men are far less likely to have restrictions made upon their bodies by governments.
There's a restriction that women have on their bodies that men don't have, and that is the legal restriction to circumcision. That's right. Men can be circumcised and women can't. In fact, parents can have their infant males circumcised and not their infant females. God, that's just such an oppressive restriction on women, isn't it? What about the oppressive restrictions when it comes to being a parent? Oh, that's right, it's the, my body, my choice thing, isn't it? If a woman wants to have a baby and the man doesn't and she gets pregnant, well, guess who's getting bent over a barrel for the next 18 years for child support? And which one of the two parents can legally opt out of parenthood either pre or post-birth? Oh yes, that would be the woman, because she has the legal right to have an abortion. A man can't force a woman to have one if he doesn't want the baby. And thanks to safe haven, or baby Moses laws as they're nicknamed, women can even give up a child. No questions asked, you just drop it off at a fire station, a police station, or a hospital, and the child becomes a ward of the state. Don't even have to tell them about the existence of the father. Seems most of those supposed restrictions on women's bodies are actually giving them more freedom than men have.
And bear all this in mind that these are points made by systemic problems in our society. We're not saying that individual men like myself might have more or less privileges than women.
Yeah, because if you actually thought about it, you'd have to realise that you have less, and that would hurt your narrative.
We're saying that on the majority scale in our society, male privilege is made in a way that favours them far more than women.
Which is why women are the disproportionate majority of the payments for child support, win custody of children in 80% plus cases, will have people to continue to believe their story even after their rape allegation has been proven to be completely false. Women will also be the recipient of up to 60% less of a sentence for a same crime that a man commits. Then there's systemic affirmative action quotas forcing private companies to hire more women. Oh no, wait, sorry, it's males who have the privilege in our society. Sorry, I got distracted by reality for a moment there.
So completely disregarding the small fact that women are also people, and just general being a solid, decent human being, these are my selfish reasons for needing feminism.
No more first world problems. Oh, please God, no more first world problems. I can't handle any more of them.
I don't see the logic behind the argument of something being a first world problem therefore invalidates it. Yes, there's a lot of postmodernist tried out there, but if you can get behind that...
Ignoring the bullshit doesn't mean it stops being bullshit.
Just because women in other parts of the world are being treated far more horrifically than they are here, and they might have bigger problems than we do, that doesn't mean that these problems that we bring up are bad or should be just dismissed, like women being catcalled. Yes, FGM is a far worse problem, but that does not mean that catcalling isn't.
Ah yes, the good old authoritarian coming out again. All catcalling is a problem, except for the women who never receive it and actually kind of wish that they would. And then there's the women who actually enjoy receiving catcalls. They consider it to be a compliment and a confidence booster. Is this all women? Absolutely not. However, for you to assert that it is a problem for all women is an absurdity, and actually rather hilarious because, you know, straight white male telling women how they should think and feel, and showing no respect for their individual choices or autonomy. But that's because you're an authoritarian who thinks that your subjective opinion on how the world should be run is the one objective true way.
Feminism, because in a world governed by the current gender roles applied to men and women, I would not be very successful at that. If all of a sudden I found myself time-traveled back into the 1950s, being married with 2 kids, having to provide for the family, having to make all the decisions completely for everyone in the house, oh god, I would not do well at that at all.
Very few people would. That's why all of those decisions and chores were divided amongst 2 adults, the man and the woman. My god, you make it sound like in the 1950s and before, women had no autonomy and made no decisions for themselves at all. It's almost like you think before the 1950s, women were not humans.
What he's saying is that back then, gender boundaries were far, far larger. Men were expected to have a job and women were expected to stay at home, look after the kids, and do the housework. And by the way, this was the majoritively held view in America up until the 90s. This is slowly changing today because of social movements, but we still have a long way to go, and men are still relatively expected to do more jobs than women. And since you stated before the 1950s, allow me to take you some things prior and after that women were not allowed to do. Women couldn't get a credit card without their husband's permission.
So a woman had to get permission from her husband to spend his money. That is, person A had to get permission from person B before person A is allowed to spend the money belonging to person B. If you expect me to feel some level of outrage over this, you're a moron. But if you think it's fine for someone to spend someone else's money that they don't own, you'll have no problem with sending me a clone of your credit and debit cards.
Women being raped by their husbands wasn't a crime.
This is a stupid argument that a lot of idiots like to bring up. The whole marital rape was legal until the 90s in America argument. What they fail to realize is that assault, battery, abuse, and all of these things were still illegal. So if a husband did rape his wife, and in doing so assault her, which he would have done because it's assault, he could still be prosecuted for that. Sure, the crime may not have been prosecuted as rape, which it probably should have been, but it's not like he could rape her and just get away with it. It would simply have come under a different charge. Also, you're making a bit of a legalistic fallacy. Just because something is legal, that doesn't mean that everyone is doing it, in the same way that just because something is illegal, that doesn't mean that everyone stops doing it. For example, zoophilia, otherwise known as bestiality, is not illegal in the state of Texas. I guess that means everyone in Texas is fucking animals on the regular. Or, now bear with me here, maybe it's just not been made illegal because it's something that comes up so rarely that no one has ever thought, hey, maybe we should make this illegal.
Women could not join the military.
Most women don't want to anyway. I also fail to see how it's an oppression to tell someone, you can't go and be shot at. And given some of the things that can happen to women in war, I wonder what the backlash would be if an entire regiment of female soldiers was captured and brutally raped over a course of several months. I wonder if there would be a sudden, very loud call to stop allowing women in frontline regiments.
Women could not get legal abortion.
In what context? In what era? In what geographical location? Never mind, let's look at some historical abortion. Ancient Greeks and Romans had absolutely no problem with it, although they did have some questionable views due to limited medical knowledge. Most of Western law has actually been based around a time known as the quickening during pregnancy, which is between sort of 18 and 20 weeks, before which time it was actually mostly okay to abort. Obviously, there have been different time periods where it was and wasn't and under different circumstances, but actually it's generally been legal. The real problem with this issue is that around the 1800s, there is quite a big black mark in human history against women in the Western world. And unfortunately, feminists and idiots, well, basically one and the same, like to take this 100-year period and try and extrapolate it out to the entirety of human history, which is simply not true. For example, until 1803, it was entirely legal to abort a fetus. In that year, a law came in stating that after the quickening period, the 18 to 20 weeks, it was illegal to do so and could be punished by death. In 1837, the quickening became abolished in its significance, but they also removed the death penalty. Now, this is the time period where abortion became illegal. Before this time, it was completely fine. Then, in the 1920s, abortion was brought back to being legalized if it was to protect the life of the mother. And since the early 1900s, we've been kind of clawing back the right to abortion. And a very similar case can be seen in America. Up until the 1800s, abortion was totally legal. The reason that it was not performed very often was not because abortion was illegal, but it was because of the historical view that sex outside of marriage was immoral. So obviously pregnancy outside of marriage, kind of an indication of sex outside of marriage. Can you see where the problem is here? It's not that abortion was illegal, it's that sex outside of marriage was so frowned upon. And then we come to the 1800s infamous 100-year black mark where abortion did become illegal. But then mirroring what happened in Britain, in the 1900s it became legal again to preserve the life of the mother, and since then it has come back up to being how it was before the 1800s. This is what really annoys me about this. Feminists they absolutely love looking at, like, the 1800s. It was pretty much the worst time period imaginable to be a woman. And then they just take whatever they find there and say, this is how it was all of the time beforehand, when it is demonstrably untrue.
Women couldn't report sexual harassment.
Again, what geographical location? What time period? What context? Never mind, let us consider the law of hue and cry. So I'm going to give you a brief overview from Lollipedia, and then we're going to read some historical manuscripts on what hue and cry actually meant. In common law, a hue and cry is a process by which bystanders are summoned to assist in the apprehension of a criminal who has been witnessed in the act of a crime. By the Statute of Winchester in 1285, it was provided that anyone, either a constable or a private citizen, who witnessed a crime shall make hue and cry, and that the hue and cry must be kept up against the fleeing criminal from town to town and from county to county until the felon is apprehended and delivered to the sheriff. All able-bodied men, upon hearing the shouts, were obliged to assist in the pursuit of the criminal, which makes it comparable to the posse communitatis. It was moreover provided that the whole 100 shall be answerable for any theft or robbery, in effect a form of collective punishment. Those who raised a hue and cry falsely were themselves guilty of a crime. So if a person is witnessed committing a crime, or if someone is the victim of a crime, they are allowed to make a hue and cry, which is why whenever you watch any historical dramas, or read any historical manuscripts, and, someone comes across a murdered person, what is the first thing they do? That's right, they look up and they shout, "Murder, murder," which is historically consistent with the hue and cry law. That is them making a hue and cry. This is a clip from a film version of Shakespeare's Othello. Now, while Iago is the person actually committing the murder here, he is still making use of the hue and cry law, in this case to take suspicion away from himself.
Human dog.
Where be these bloody thieves? Oh! Murder! Murder!
Yeah, I admit it, I just wanted to slip that clip in there because I love that film. But another example is when, again, you watch historical films or you read historical stories, what do you find people doing when they've been pickpocketed? They shout, "Stop thief." Again, the hue and cry law in action. Now let's read a little bit from history, shall we? From Ramsay, The Lives of an English Fenland Town, 1200 to 1600. The first surviving reference in Ramsay's Town Leet to the raising of the hue and cry comes from 1280, when William of Wellington was immersed for receiving prostitutes and strangers into the town who frequently raised the hue and cry. During the ensuing 150 years, thousands of English and Welsh townspeople and villagers embraced this opportunity with gusto, and local court rolls abound with amusing as well as alarming examples of enthusiastic employment of the hue and cry. The hue and cry was an institution beautifully designed, whether consciously or not, to provide women with a clear and loud voice, literally, in this public sphere. In hue and cry cases, we see women at their most emotional attempting to deal with what must have been a traumatic personal conflict with fellow townspeople. If a married woman's cow or horse wandered off, if she planted willows in the wrong place or blocked a public gutter, or if someone from her household dug clay and left it in the road, it was very likely her husband would be cited in court for the oversight, just as if it was he who would act as pledge, serve as coroner, juratus, or ale taster, who kept night watch when called upon to do so. So if a woman done fucked up in her society, it was her husband who would be held accountable, not her. However, if a married woman walked onto Bridge Street and encountered a business partner, interesting that women should have business partners when they've been oppressed throughout all of history and not allowed to own businesses or property or do anything. Funny how that would come up. Anyway, if they encountered a business partner or neighbour with a serious grudge and became engaged in a serious dispute or was assaulted in her person, then she raised a hue and cry, and expected the court ultimately to decide whether her cries for help were justified or not. Under those circumstances, her status as wife or contenant was not of interest to the town jurors in the sense that her husband was not expected to represent her under these particular circumstances. She was the person who raised a public cry, and it was she who bore the responsibility if the court decided that she had disrupted the public peace for no good cause and had thereby made a false accusation against an innocent person. So this is actually quite a forward-thinking and progressive law. A woman at any time can make a hue and cry against someone who is, say, sexually harassing her. Any man within earshot will instantly be obliged by the law to basically tackle her assailant and drag him to the sheriff, at which point a court proceeding will be opened, and then it will be decided if her hue and cry was justified or not. If her hue and cry is found to be just, and the man was actually sexually harassing her, sexually assaulting her, or raping her, or something like that, well, as we covered in a previous video looking at punishments for crimes, the man could then be expected to be castrated and killed, and his animals having their scrotums and tails cut off. And if it was found that her hue and cry was unjust, then she would be punished for lying. So in many ways, the days of old were actually more equal than ours, because they would punish a woman for lying, whereas we do not punish women who lie about rape these days. I could go on reading this document, and I'm very tempted to. In fact, I'm tempted to kind of give it a video of its own, because it's a very interesting law. And this document does then go on to list hundreds of cases where women successfully enacted hue and cry laws against men, and against other women, rather interestingly. But I think I've made my point. You have given absolutely no historical concept for your claim that women could not report sexual harassment, and I have just shown you a 400-year period where they most certainly could and did.
And women could be fired for being pregnant.
I kind of addressed this point earlier. If you take 6 months to a year off of your job, it is unreasonable to expect someone to pay you for the time that you are not working for them. And it's entirely reasonable for them to say, well, you know what, if you're not going to work for me for a year and then still expect me to give you a job after this, walk on. Because that is exactly what would happen to a man. But of course, women get special treatment here. They make a personal choice that means that they don't work for 6 months to a year. Not only do they get paid for not working, but they still have a job at the end of it. No such opportunity is afforded to a man.
I'm shy, I'm passive, I'm definitely not good at making decisions for other people. That would be bad news bears, the family would fall the freak apart.
But feminism has constantly told you that by making decisions and by being a leader, you're a patriarchal oppressor.
No, the point is that the problems are systemic, in other words, inherent to the system we live in, namely our capitalist state system. Not that individual men doing things makes them patriarchal oppressors. It's not about hating men. It's about the fact that all of the societal functions that we have favour men more than women.
And on that day, not a single example nor shred of evidence was presented.
He was making the point in that statement that women have been systemically oppressed throughout history in comparison to men. And if you want evidence of this, let's consider that women have been effectively bought and sold to different landowners throughout history.
The entirety of the slave trade throughout pretty much all of human history would like to have a word with you. Yes, there were men involved in that slave trade as well.
If you look at the backlash, the horrific backlash to the women trying to get the vote.
And most of that backlash was actually from other women, who opposed the concept of suffrage because they basically didn't want to take on the same responsibilities that men had. Basically, most women didn't want to have to sign the draft, and they often preferred the fact that they could quite easily get their men to do whatever they wanted to do via other means. And so they saw the idea of voting as basically a waste of their time, who also saw the suffragettes as a bunch of basically mad, hysterical terrorists. Which, given the fact that they used to chain themselves to railings, set fire to buildings, and blow things up, is not entirely inaccurate. But I love how, once again, you are defending some women by stepping on the voices of other women.
And if you look at women throughout history who were not allowed to work, or at the very least were not expected to work and expected to be houseworkers and nothing else.
There is a difference between being forced to not work and being permitted to not work. Again, I reference 1200 to 1600 women meeting business partners. Sorry, women have historically been able to work. The reality is they have simply historically not been expected to work, which is actually quite a privilege. Although we should now point out that actually the only women who didn't really work were mostly only the upper classes, unsurprisingly women of the working class. Well, the clue is in the name.
In terms of anarchism as well, we view the nuclear family as inherently oppressive, and is one of the baselines for all authoritarian regimes that we have today.
Nope, you are not an anarchist, because you don't know what anarchy is. Not all anarchists oppose the existence of the nuclear family unit. The anarchists who oppose the nuclear family unit are Marxists, that is, anarcho-communists, which is what you are. You do not oppose the existence of the family unit because you are an anarchist, you oppose the existence of the family unit because you are a Marxist.
Men have dominion over the wife and the children.
Sure, men have absolute and total power over their wives and children, which is why we have the stereotype of the henpecked husband, the man with his balls in a vice, who can't do anything without the say-so of his wife.
And if you think that this is the natural system of family arrangements, I suggest that a good book for you to read would be Friedrich Engels' The Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State.
Well, that says everything we need to know, doesn't it? Hey, I've got this book that tells you why capitalism and the family is bad. It's written by a Marxist who attended the Frankfurt School. It's totally not biased. Hey buddy, I've got a great book that you should read. It explains why communism is bad, why Marxism is terrible for humanity. It also tells you why blacks are inferior, gays are evil, and Jews need to be exterminated. It's called Mein Kampf, and it was written by Adolf Hitler. It's totally not biased, and I can absolutely vouch for the integrity of the author.
And now you're probably going to say, well, not all women were forced not to work, not all women were forced into marriages, yet Kate got it. There's no comparison. Can you find in our Western world, in the past 500 years or so at least, of men who were not allowed to work but women were, with men who were sold to other landowners for property? Yeah, can you find that?
Sure, from the Isle of Man transatlantic slave trade, and the Isle of Man Today reporting on it. The Manx Museum has a display meticulously researched by 18th century smuggling expert Francis Wilkins, who lives in the West Midlands, cataloguing the part played by Manx mariners in the colonial slave trade system. When in the early 1760s the Lords of the Treasury in Westminster wrote to the Custom House in England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland asking for their views on the island's role of a smuggling centre outside Crown control, the officers of Dublin also added the Liverpool merchants import from Holland to the Isle of Man and lodge in store which they have provided their gunpowder, firearms, toys and East India goods for the African trade. This was a reference to the triangular trade by which merchants based in northern England used the island as a storehouse for weapons and cheap manufactured goods which they could ship to West Africa. These stores were bartered with the native population to obtain slaves, who were taken across the Atlantic to work for the American and Caribbean plantations. And obviously, when those slaves got there, they were either bought for money, which is a form of property, or they would give goods to the mariners who would then take it back to the storehouse on the Isle of Man, only to take it back to Africa once again to trade those items, those pieces of property, for humans. Men being humans, of course. So that is just one source from 300 years ago. You're welcome. Can't wait to see how rapidly the goalposts shift on those criteria now. Because you're a communist Marxist, probably some bullshit about how money isn't property, even though back in this time period, paper money was a direct representation of how much gold you owned. Gold being property.
There are dark sides to pretty much every movement throughout history. Civil rights movement, for example, had Malcolm X prior to his final year. You had political lesbianism during the 1980s. You have Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris of the New Atheist movement. And if I went far back, I could probably even include Martin Luther in the Reformation. There are female supremacists, as he stated at the beginning of the video. Feminists like me and like him do not agree with these people. Back in the 1950s, one Murray Rothbard created a sect of anarchism called anarcho-capitalism, which is completely against the entire history of the anarchist movement in general.
Oh, you do not understand anarchism at all, do you? In an anarchist system where there is no central rule, every person is effectively a trading force and a government unto themselves. People can and will therefore trade what they have, be it resources, time, or labor, to other people. These exchanges will vary according to the scarcity of whatever it is that they are offering, be it scarcity of a particular resource or scarcity of a particular talent, working in tandem with demand for that particular resource or demand for that particular talent. An anarchist system is therefore inherently capitalist by nature. But you don't understand this because you don't understand anarchism. But you don't understand this because you're a Marxist authoritarian who thinks that his subjective opinion on how the world should be run is the one true objective way.
In the mainstream anarchist movement today, we have people who are pretty much absolutist on causing violence to people's property, even if they're just normal generic homeowners, and some of them nearby where I live. You can support a cause without needing to associate with individual members. And while we're at it, how are you, because I'm guessing you're implying this, how are you not so certain that people of the men's rights movement or of the anti-feminist crowd or MGTOW or whatever are not also male supremacists?
I don't. But then I'm not actually a part of any of those things that you've listed, so I really don't give a fuck what individuals are doing who take those labels.
You can call yourself a feminist, you can not call yourself a feminist, but at the end of the day, it's an important thing that we need to talk about.
So wait, whether I do or do not identify as a feminist is an important thing to talk about. But didn't you just say...
I don't really care about what you label yourself as or what you don't label yourself as.
Yeah, I thought so. But anyway, moving on.
You can call yourself a feminist, you can not call yourself a feminist, but at the end of the day, it's an important thing that we need to talk about. You can call yourself a feminist, you can not call yourself a feminist, but at the end of the day, it's an important thing that we need to talk about.
This is your subjective interpretation of what he said. It's different from my subjective interpretation of what he said. Next.
Because when I drive home from work and I hear songs like Blurred Lines and Talk Dirty to Me, which make women out to be an object of a man's pleasure, we gotta talk about it.
Because there are no examples out there of women singing songs that reduce men to objects of their pleasure.
Come here, rude boy, boy, can you get it up? Come here, rude boy, boy, is you big enough?
Oh.
Let's do a little bit of video analysis.
You mean let's do a little bit of subjective interpretivist wankery. Okay.
In Blurred Lines, we see a bunch of fully clothed men going about staring and objectifying naked women as the model sex. This reinforces the notion that women should be flirtatious and girly and men should be the voyeurs.
Wow, so not only do you not understand anarchism, you also don't understand objectification. Here is a list of ways in which you can objectify someone or something. These women are not being treated as instruments, as if tools for a purpose. They are not being denied any sort of autonomy. They certainly have agency and self-determination because they are choosing to engage in this behavior. They are not being treated as if they are some inert object, unable to do anything. They're not being treated as if they're interchangeable in any capacity, because each one is being appreciated for their own individual talents and abilities. There is no evidence in this video of it being permissible to be violent or behave destructively in any capacity towards any of these women. There doesn't actually appear to be any sort of sign of ownership in here. These men do not own these women. They're not treating them as if they are some sort of property. And there is no denial of subjectivity going on here, because these men are not denying the feelings of these women. Quite the contrary, they are in fact playing into the feelings of the women. But hey, that's just my subjective interpretation of what I'm seeing. because I see a bunch of free agents on the screen there who have all willingly taken part in the production of a music video. Every woman is there of their own volition, and they have been employed to do a job. If they found that job disagreeable, then they could walk away at any time. But let me guess, because you're an authoritarian, your subjective opinion is the one true way. Of course it is. I'm noticing a theme here, and quite a large part of that theme is you ignoring the autonomy of women. Honestly, you're starting to strike me as a little bit of a sexist.
In Rude Boy, is there really much difference? Rihanna prances around doing lap dance moves while singing about how she wants men to fuck her. Seriously, listen to the whole song and not just that first verse.
Tonight I'ma let you be the captain. Tonight I'ma let you do your thing, yeah. Boy, I want what you want. Give it to me, baby, like boom, boom, boom.
Not exactly breaking any boundaries today, are we?
Oh look, once again you're ignoring the agency of a woman and belittling her. Tonight I'm going to let you. Tonight I'm going to let you. This is a woman who is completely in control of the sexual activity that is happening. This is not a woman being an object to be acted upon. This is a woman who has total power in the situation. And then the whole give it to me baby like boom boom boom. Again, this is a woman with total agency in the situation, telling a man that she is going to permit him to please her and telling him how to do it. But of course, you instantly leap to the conclusion that she has no agency or no power, because like most modern feminists, you're a fucking misogynist.
There's also the overall fact that men in these videos are being given the idealized image, whereas women are being given the objectified image.
Because none of those women are slim, attractive, or displaying any sort of talent, which is totally not a desirable, idealized trait. And Rihanna is still treating men like objects for her own sexual pleasure in that video. Oh, but I forgot, your subjective opinion is the one objective truth. Of course it is.
I think the best example of this that I can give is an episode of Jim Question on The Escapist.
Most AAA games are still made entirely with young men in mind. That's not an assumption. Ken Levine himself admits BioShock Infinite was marketed to appeal to frat boys. Naughty Dog has revealed its focus testers didn't want to see what women thought of The Last of Us and was trying to appeal exclusively to males. Objectification is the reduction of a human being to a thing, an item, a something to possess. This is what's meant when we say women are objectified. In a previous video I explained how video games typically objectify women by making them the targets of sexual desire while stripping them of their agency and sex. Women are allowed to dress skimpily, they're allowed to be hit on, and they're allowed to be fucked. However, they're not allowed to initiate sexual contact, be playable during a sex scene, or really have any input in a relationship outside of being an objective, a goal, a thing for the male hero to go after. This is not what happens with male characters. They're presented as tall, muscular, heroic, and brave, and most importantly, they're not supposed to be things we want to own. They're not targets, they're not goals. Their ideals are our goals, but they themselves as individuals are not. And that's what men are in the game industry. Not objectified, but idealised. Now, frankly, I think this uniform idealisation of what men ought to be is a problem in and of itself, but it's not the same problem faced by women. It's a different problem, and it's not equal, especially when the idealisation involves traits that are generally considered pretty good to have. Physical strength, nobility, bravery. I mean, I'd rather have those traits than have no personality or life outside me tits and vulva.
And now you're probably going to say something like, but biology suggests otherwise. Yeah, cool, Kate, thanks for the acknowledgement. Now can we perhaps move on and solve this problem?
Yes, we all know that you're an authoritarian who thinks that your subjective opinion is the one objective truth. Not everyone perceives this as a problem. Stop belittling and marginalizing the voices of people who don't care, or people who like things like this.
But the thing is, the point that's being made in these societal responses is mainly from proponents of social justice, is that you can still enjoy these things for what they are, but you can also be critical of them. I mean, don't just take my word for it. Anita Sarkeesian points out this, for whatever you think about her, points out this in basically every tropes video she's made.
As always, it's important to keep in mind that it's entirely possible to be critical of some aspects of a piece of media while still finding other parts valuable or enjoyable. But remember that it's both possible, and even necessary, to simultaneously enjoy media while also being critical of its more problematic or pernicious aspects. Part of being a fan for me is to enjoy and celebrate characters and stories and programs that I love while simultaneously being critical of the myths and representations that the media can perpetuate.
Just like I can still enjoy films like Straw Dogs and Once Upon a Time in America despite having very derogatory claims and representations of women. That's how you create change.
Boom! Right there is your problem. And once again confirms what I have been saying throughout this entire video. You are an authoritarian who thinks that your subjective opinion is the objective truth. Because you don't like something, you see that as a reason that it must be changed, regardless of what other people's opinions are. Which is why when women tell you that catcalling is not a problem, that they would like it to happen to them, and that they even enjoy it, you ignore and marginalize their voices. And it's the same thing with video games. When women stand up and say, no, we actually like video games like this, we like being able to play as strong, sexy women, people like you shout them down and ignore them. Just because you don't like something, that doesn't mean everything has to change to suit you. Just because you don't like something, that doesn't mean that that thing is not allowed to exist.
I talk to female friends of mine all the time about how they're constantly harassed and valued for only their appearance over the internet and in person while walking down the street. We gotta talk about it.
And that recent viral street harassment video has proved that saying good morning counts as harassment now.
One or two of the comments were good morning or have a nice day. However, the majority of the video is men making snide sexist comments towards this girl who was just walking down the street. But of course, people like to concentrate on the small, tiny examples rather than the blazingly obvious ones.
Yourself included, clearly. Because if you watch that video, you will notice that the overwhelming majority of those comments come from black men. So if you want me to accept that all of these things are issues of harassment, and that harassment is a problem, and that this must be changed, then you must also accept that the majority of the perpetrators are black, and that this is therefore a problem with the black male community. Can't see you jumping on that bandwagon anytime soon, though. There is a link in the box below this video which explains to you why this study of theirs is complete and utter bullshit. Unsurprisingly, it basically criticizes them for exactly what they're doing, which is gathering a bunch of results and then crafting their hypothesis afterwards, while rather conveniently ignoring half of the data.
We have a lot of things we gotta talk about. There are a lot of people out there who say things like we don't need feminism anymore because there are laws in place that make women equal to men, and yeah, that's true.
If a movement is campaigning for equal rights of several groups of people, and those several groups of people already have legal equal rights, then that movement is entirely redundant, isn't it?
Again, fallacy of definition. Feminism is not simply about changing laws in this current state that we live in. It's also about changing society so that we are both equal. If, say, society had a law that men must catcall women whenever they see them, or as much as possible, for whatever reason, and this would probably be your definition of oppression. But if a society didn't have that law, but rather it was simply a tradition in that society for whatever reason, let's say in Teal Deer Land, people catcall women based on the evolutionary gender dysmorphism.
Yeah, I think you'll find that's actually the real world, not Teal Deer Land. Sexual and gender dimorphism is a real, observable, medical, biological fact. It is not something that I'm just making up in my head. Oh, but wait, you're a cultural Marxist, so evidence doesn't matter on this issue. Because all people are same, comrade. Which, by odd coincidence, is actually rather funny. Remember back to when we were talking about objectification? Yeah, if you think all people are the same and identical, then you think all people are totally interchangeable, which means you are objectifying all people. But we've already worked out that you're some sort of sexist authoritarian, so I'm not even remotely surprised. Let the accusations of strawmanning begin.
Regardless of any laws that women should be catcalled in public, according to you, those people are just assholes. You know, this isn't addressing the problem at hand here. Rather than the consensus being, women are being catcalled, this is a terrible thing that we should conquer in our society.
Because you're an authoritarian who thinks that your subjective opinion is the one objective true way.
Instead, especially on the internet, it's, well, just deal with it. You know, stop being the victim, toughen up. Would you say this if somebody was being homophobically harassed on the street? Or if a black guy was being called a nigger? I expect you wouldn't.
Yes, I would give them the exact same message. Offense is never given, it is only taken. If someone is being a bigoted dick, you can just laugh at them for being stupid. or just ignore them and get on with your life. Or since racism and homophobia are illegal, you could actually report them to the police. Or I suppose if you really felt like it, you could confront them yourself. It's entirely your choice. But yes, my advice to them would still be, those people over there are assholes. Because they are. See, are you noticing the difference between your approach to things and my approach to things? See, my approach to things is, if you think it is a problem, you take whatever action you need to do in order to remedy it. Your view is, this thing is a problem and everyone must work to change it because I think it's a problem. And my subjective opinion is the one objective truth.
Because it isn't just women's fight, it's everyone's fight, and everyone stands to benefit from a world in which everyone can exist as themselves, and for everyone else involved.
Find me one example in the Western world where any type of person is legally discriminated against in any capacity.
Oh, for fuck's sake, Teal dear, grow up!
Yeah, grow up. Stop asking people to provide evidence for their claims. It's so childish. Fucking hell, you're a moron. Next. Also, the way you keep talking about the world, it really makes me think like you are referring to third world countries again. Places that, yes, have absolutely massive issues that do need to be fixed. But guess what? You are not the freaking world police. Other countries have other governments who will run their countries as they damn well please. You are not part of the electorate of that country. You are not part of the government of that country. You have no right to dictate what they should and should not do.
Bravo, Teal dear, progressing social change with every single passing minute. Just believe that people should only act on the individual basis, that they should never organise and never believe for 1 second that they can change the world.
Wow, that's a straw man and a half if I've ever seen one. I have never told people to not try and change things. But what you have to realise is that people are free to live their lives as they want. If other people want to go and form governments and run other areas of land how they so choose, you cannot tell them that it is wrong. But you wouldn't understand that, because for all you're touting yourself as an anarchist, you do not understand anarchy. The point that I am making here is that you cannot force your point of view on other people. By all means, feel free to suggest, but don't get pissed off if they don't listen, because it is not your place to control the lives of others.
Also, when you say,
other countries have other governments who will run their countries as they damn well please.
Are you actually justifying the state here? Because if you like, I can go to town on you on what justifies the state, and how it is inherently immoral.
Whoa, careful everyone, we've got an internet tough guy here. Fortunately, he's a fucking moron. States are not inherently immoral. If a group of people form together to form a voluntary cooperative, whereby they opt into or opt out of and voluntarily pay money towards a central form of government for their own welfare, then that is not inherently evil. There is nothing oppressive about it because it is constructed on a voluntary basis. The point where a state becomes immoral is when it forces its citizens into compliance via the use of violence. So, for example, where people are forced to pay taxes, that is someone being forced to pay money to the state for services that they may not necessarily be using. There is no ability to opt out. And that person's compliance with that tax is backed up by the threat of violence, which is the threat of the use of police. That is the point that a state becomes immoral. The existence of a government is not inherently evil. And as an anarchist, you actually cannot deny other people getting together and forming their own states, or forming their own governments. Because by forcing people not to do that, you have become the state. But you don't understand this because you're an authoritarian who thinks that your subjective opinion is the one true objective way. And this all stems from the fact that you are a Marxist. Because your anarcho-communist dreams simply cannot be without the existence of a totalitarian state, because not everyone will always universally agree on how to run a society, and so they must be made to cooperate. And all of this comes down to the basic economic principles of scarcity of resources. The world's resources are not equally distributed. They will require being moved. When you move something from somewhere where it is in abundance to somewhere where there is none of it, you inherently increase the value of that object due to scarcity. Especially when you combine that with the simple fact of supply and demand. Which is why in a scarce resource world, which is what we live on, any anarchist system will always inherently be capitalistic in nature. The only way to escape this is to find our way into a post-scarcity society, which is not going to happen anytime soon and will probably never happen, because resources are all finite. Some of them may last for millions or billions of years, but they are still finite. But yeah, this'll be good. Let's watch the anarchist who doesn't understand anarchy go to town on the... Well, I'm more of a minarchist than an anarchist. I think a minarchy would just be easier, because at least then you do have the ability to enforce universal laws such as do not murder, do not rape, etc. And it can be a universally applied principle so everyone will know the law governing it in every capacity. It wouldn't be like going from one area of land to the other, and basically having an overly complicated region by region or even road by road breakdown of different laws. That's why I think minarchy would be easier, but yeah, it should be entertaining to listen to the anarchist who doesn't understand anarchy talking to me about how I don't understand anarchy and the state. Although there's probably going to be some butthurt anarcho-communists in the comment section anyway. And while we're on this topic, anarcho-feminist, are you fucking serious? Feminism as an ideology is in bed with the state. It's inseparable from the state. In fact, most of my issues with feminism comes from the fact that they use the power of the state.
How was he dictating? He was bringing up the idea and advocating the point that we should aim for a world that does not discriminate against one another.
Advocate all you want, but don't get pissed off when people don't listen because they don't agree with your subjective opinion.
And this does not come from this belief that we should just sit on our asses and believe that, well, there are always going to be assholes, there are always going to be misogynists, there are always going to be racists, there are always going to be poor. So basically, because we can never hope to get 100%, we should not even bother to go for 99.9%. Brilliant, brilliant idea.
A world that is 99.9% perfect in whose opinion? Say it with me one more time. You are an authoritarian who believes that your subjective opinion is the one true objective way a world should be run. You will never get 99.9% of people to agree on everything. Ever. The only way you could do that is to force them to do so. Which apparently you're totally okay with. Because despite all of your claims about being an anarchist who supports personal freedom, you're not and you don't.
So, that was my rebuttal to Teal Deer. I'm sorry that I got a bit over the moon at some parts, but I found these things on feminists and anti-feminists and whatever really do infuriate me. So this will not be the last you hear of me on Teal Deer. I've even got another video planned.
Oh, please no. Your fundamental lack of understanding of everything is just horrendous. But fortunately for the people who did sit through this ridiculously long video, I am not going to be dealing with this guy ever again. He has a lot to say and a very nice way of saying it, but there is absolutely no substance to anything that he says. It is just assertion after assertion after assertion and non-stop contradictions.